Hello, I'm Frank Brady. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce you to our impact benchmarking services. By way of quick background, my first job in a hospital was to manage a field test of techniques to measure and improve organizational effectiveness in the clinical setting under a grant from what is now the Department of Health and Human Services. That experience gave me a unique insight into the performance limiting factors around which our services are based. I went on to work as a hospital CEO in community, Catholic, and proprietary hospitals before founding Brady Associates more than 30 years ago. We hope you find this presentation useful. Thank you for watching. Impact has supported the management initiatives of more than 750 hospitals of all sizes, missions, and ownership types throughout the U.S., as well as in Europe, Canada, and the Middle East. We are consultants to other national and international consultants such as McKinsey and Company, the Lewin Group, and Aon Hewitt, and we are a resource to AHA and HFMA. We are on the web at http://bradyinc.com. We use data, systems thinking, and change management techniques to help hospitals improve organizational effectiveness. What is a benchmark? It's important to make a distinction between a benchmark, which is a standard by which something can be measured or judged, and a management target or goal. A benchmark usually comes from an external source. Management standards, on the other hand, are adopted by the organization to manage by. Benchmarks are commonly used to develop or calibrate management targets or standards, but they are not the same thing. The impact database is the engine that drives the benchmarking process. The database contains validated hospital and department level staffing and activity data. These are client data. They come from 765 U.S. hospitals, more than 24,000 hospital departments, and 302 department types. The database contains validity checking algorithms that expect to see certain relationships within your data set, both within and across departments. If, for example, the hospital reports X number of acute inpatient days, and the laboratory reports Y number of billed tests to inpatients, the database expects the relationship between those two numbers to fall within an expected range. That range, of course, will vary by hospital size and type. If the observed data do not fall within those expected ranges, we will recontact the hospital to validate the information. The information in the next few slides is important because it describes Impact's two-step peer group selection process and the concepts of intrinsic and elective characteristics. Together, they explain why Impact's benchmarks are unique. In step one, the database selects peers at the hospital level, hospitals that are like yours in terms of size, type, setting, teaching status, and case mix. In step two, Impact chooses department peers from within the hospital peer group chosen in the first step based on department type and workload. It is highly likely that your department's peer groups will be selected from different subsets within the hospital level peer group to match type and workload. This is positive because department type and workload are ultimately controlling in terms of labor needs. One of the most common concerns that department heads have when they hear about a new benchmarking process is that they're going to be compared against the right kinds of departments. We call this the apples to apples problem. If you were to ask your department heads how many of them feel that they are unique, most of them would raise their hands. And the fact of the matter is that they're right. No two hospitals or departments are exactly alike. And frankly, that's the value of benchmarking. What's important to understand, though, is what are the reasons that hospitals and departments vary from one another. And what we've found is that they vary from one another because of intrinsic and elective characteristics. Intrinsic characteristics describe the work to be done. Here, for example, is an intrinsic characteristic statement for an inpatient nursing unit. Provide inpatient nursing care to an average of 30 adult med-surg patients in an urban acute care hospital with a hospital acute ADC of 140 and a case mix index of 1.4952. Elective characteristics reflect the choices the hospital has made over time in deciding how to do the job the intrinsic characteristics define. These characteristics fall into four major factor categories. There are the systems and work process factors, the familiar system and work process factors that Deming, Duran, and the quality movement focus upon. And they are important, but they're not everything. Resource factors include equipment, supplies, technology, physical plant layout, the skill of management, and the capabilities and competencies of your employees. Organizational factors are a bit more abstract, but very powerful. They include such things as how you schedule work, how you schedule employees, what your organization chart looks like, and how you communicate within the hospital. Institutional culture factors are stated formally by the hospital's mission, goals, and objectives. Informally, they include the beliefs and expectations of patients, the community, the medical staff, management, and department employees, and the behaviors that flow from those beliefs and expectations. Examples of culture defining factors are the medical staff's assumptions about its relationship with hospital, the focus and values of management, and employee beliefs about what constitutes a fair workload. The impact database selects peer groups based on intrinsic characteristics. And again, on this slide, you will see an intrinsic characteristic statement for an inpatient nursing unit. If we've done a good job of selecting peers based on intrinsic characteristics, then it must be the case that any differences we see in performance among members of the peer group are the result of elective characteristics. It's important to understand that impact is not trying to compare you against hospitals that look exactly like you. That's an impossibility. And impact benchmarks can't tell you how you should staff your departments. We tell our clients that these numbers have no moral content. But what they can tell you is what is the range of paid and productive hours per unit of service actually used in lean, well-managed departments with similar workloads in hospitals that share your intrinsic characteristics. Department performance is compared against a range of observed peer group performance based on paid and worked hours per unit of service. The top of the range, or the least lean end of the range, is defined by each peer group's mean or average level of paid and worked hours per unit of service. The bottom of the range, or the leanest end of the range, is at the -1 standard deviation level of observed paid and worked hours per unit of service. Each department in the impact database has units of service that are department specific: build, test, and lab, examinations and radiology, patient days in nursing units, meal served, etc. Except on nursing med-surg units, impact treats observation patients as patient day equivalents. Impact will answer these key questions. How does the number of FTEs compare to peers, department by department? What is the range of paid and worked hours per unit of service observed in leaner peers? What is the annualized effect of variances on cost based on your pay rates? How does your use of overtime compare to peers? There are times when the judicious use of overtime is a better solution than staffing up. So when looking at the overtime number, consider all of the numbers in that department's report, including whether or not it's staffed in a lean fashion to begin with. It may be that the use of overtime is why it's able to perform the way that it does. And finally, how does the productive or worked hours to paid hours ratio compare to peers? In most U.S. hospitals, productive hours are going to be somewhere between 87% and 91% of paid hours. If you're coming in much lower than 87%, you're not getting as much bang for your buck as your peers. On the other hand, if you're coming in way over 91%, that can be the sign of a stressed department. The best uses of impact's staffing benchmarks are: 1, establish, calibrate, or refine departmental workload-based productivity management standards, and 2, identify potential opportunities for cost reduction and improved quality, greater physician and patient satisfaction, better employee relations, and enhanced community image. The process begins with an introductory kickoff meeting conducted either on your campus or by telephone. We follow that with department manager interviews. These are structured interviews of 30 minutes with each individual department head. There are 2 purposes for the interviews. One is to make certain that we understand all of the functions that are embedded in each department. And secondly, it helps the department manager develop confidence in the process. At the same time, we're gathering department labor data, that's payroll data, plus any contract labor, and unit of service data for each department. Those data are reviewed and validated for reasonableness using the validity checking algorithms we referred to earlier. Peer groups are then selected based on hospital and department characteristics, and we produce a discussion draft for review with senior management. After that review is completed and any necessary changes made, we prepare and deliver the initial report. Our goal is to complete the first discussion draft within 30 days. This will be contingent upon the availability of people for interviews and the quality of data. The next step is to identify, prioritize, and resolve performance limiting factors, beginning with those departments that appear to offer the greatest opportunity for performance improvement. Best results are obtained if you use a department team to identify performance improvement opportunities by systematically inventorying the systems and work process, resource, organizational, and institutional culture factors at work in that department.